Hello and Erin go Bra. This is episode 8 on St. Patrick's Day weekend. I am the Falcon.
And I am the Dove.
Welcome to our podcast. And the Prince is here as well. The Black Lab, who is our constant companion and family member. And he'll probably be breathing his opinion from time to time. We have so much to go over this week, but let's start with something that we did talk about last week, as we talked about sequential art in the graphic novel. Keyword novel, as in fictionalized. Our brothers and sisters in Iran are very, very upset about the movie 300, which made $70 million in its opening weekend. That's going to be like the biggest March opening ever. Is it not the biggest March opening ever? I think it is.
I think it is.
And I mean, who was in second?
But Wild Hogs.
Wow, yes, Wild Hogs.
With 28 million.
Well, there we are.
Yikes.
I mean, weren't even in the same air space. That's just unbelievable. I mean, I know Warner Brothers wasn't expecting it to be quite that high. I mean, it was like double what they thought they were going to make.
Everybody was starved for films, apparently.
I think so. And then, fascinated by the subject matter. But my Iranian brothers and sisters are all upset because they don't like the fictionalization of the tale, because, of course, it's based on history. And the the historic novel, the Jumbo Shrimp,
novel
has been a bastion of American novel work for the past 30 years or so, really big time. And some series book series were based on the idea of historic novels, loosely based on history, but really any resemblance to history is purely coincidental and not to be taken as fact. Apparently, no one explained this to our Iranian brothers and sisters, and they think this is a U.S. conspiracy and that, we're out to make them look bad. They can relax, because I actually walked up and got in my own survey to 20 people this week who saw the film 300. Not one of them actually believed this was based on anything in history that was real. Not one. And of the three out of 20, who actually did know that it was based on something in history, not one of them believed that it was historically accurate. That's because most Americans are familiar with Frank Miller and are familiar with his writings and his novel and his sequential art, and therefore understand that this project was fictionalized. But I think Warner Brothers might want to make a bigger deal of that internationally and let people know that this is an adaptation of a novel. This is kind of like doing an adaptation of any piece of fiction that may have some historical foundation, but not to be taken as fact. No one is discrediting the contribution nor the personality of the Persians, though I do understand why you may not like some of the depictions. They're very two-dimensional and kind of harsh. It was not meant to be offensive at all, because frankly, you give us too much credit. Americans are not organized enough in sequential art and in novellas to create a conspiracy. So believe me, it's okay. They didn't mean anything by it. They're just making up stuff, and they just really wanted to show off buff guys and have lots of swords and blood and guts. That's why they call them swords and hordes films. They're really not meant to be taken all that seriously from a historic standpoint. They're beautiful, gritty, tremendously challenging to the eye, but not in any way, shape, or form factual.
But this is the first time that a film was made and unintentionally offended a lot of people.
Well, no, we probably get a laundry list of films with that's happened, and it's not the first time that films have been done like this that have offended, our Eastern brothers and sisters. And really, anybody who's taking AP history, I believe it's the junior level that really goes into the European history. You might be some seniors, and you understand that this has been a 1,000-year battle, and the East and West don't always see eye to eye when it comes to philosophy or faith or war. And unfortunately, all three of those things are intertwined. What could probably best be said about this is to take it as entertainment, because that was I don't know Zack Snyder, but he comes across to me as the kind of guy who just wanted to recreate Frank Miller for the screen, not recreate history. I think we would have to leave that for others. And maybe some others should pay attention to it. And I do get annoyed by things like Troy, where, and don't get me wrong, I adore Brendan Gleeson. I think he's one of my favorite actors in the top 50 for sure. But he had no business being Agamemnon in Troy. And I think even he would say that. He made a really kind of cool, quirky Mad-Eye Moody. And I've seen him probably, 30 films. And I've liked him in every other film. But he wasn't Agamemnon. Wrong height. Wrong race, wrong, it wasn't meant to be an historic depiction. I think most people who went to see that understood that. Frankly, I was sitting there waiting.
I don't think it was Mad-Eye either.
But
hey, that's just me.
From a book perspective, there are those individuals who didn't think he was a very good
but it's not his fault.
Barty Crouch Jr., but,
But it's not his fault.
But I just enjoyed having him on the screen and kind of like, the oil-soiled cotton and leather for,
It looks like
however long.
It looks like some biker you see on the highway.
Which brings us to Wild Hogs, which was the number 2 movie. Hey, some people like old guys in leather. Brendan, not that you're old. I know you're 29 again.
No. I have nothing against guys on. I'm just saying, the guys on motorcycles. I'm just saying that Mad-Eye Moody's not supposed to look like a guy on a motorcycle.
Oh, well, apparently somebody likes that. I did hear Colbert say this week he's going to get himself a leather thong after 300. Guys in leather and pecs.
I love motorcycles. Yeah. I love guys on motorcycles. Nothing against them. They're just not supposed to look like a wizard who fights other dark wizards.
Well, instead, the number 2 movie was they look like, the Wild Hogs bunch, which, William H. Macy doing bikes. How about that? That was, we're so used to saying it was so serious. We're used to Tim Allen being funny, and I understand John Travolta is going to go completely to the other side by dressing up for Hairspray.
Hairspray, yeah.
And I saw one clip from that. He was like indistinguishable. So that was pretty interesting makeup job. So
you could just barely tell that it was him.
It'll be interesting to see what the receipts are for this weekend for 300 and the rest of the bunch.
And Bridge to Terabithia is still hanging on
to
third
place. It's still hanging in there.
It's
hanging in there, and
ahead of Ghost Rider.
For those of you who have younger children, make your decision on Bridge to Terabithia carefully. For those of you who have older children, I'm talking 10 and older, you're probably okay.
Yeah.
But parents of younger children, you may actually want to see this film first. Give the kids to the babysitter. Then decide whether or not your children can handle it.
Disney broke the rule.
Yeah, Disney broke the rule. It happens you know what we mean by
the unwritten rule.
The rule.
The unspoken rule.
Yeah, like the My Girl rule. You know what we mean. Not giving anything away. Those of you who know what My Girl means, then you know what we're talking about in Bridge to Terabithia. If you don't, then you don't, and you'll just go see the movie. And my daughter's going, My Girl. And see, it worked. It worked.
I don't know what My Girl is.
It worked. But the parents...
I know what the rule is.
My age or slightly younger will understand what that means, And it's the old Yeller rule, I'm still trying to recover from that, as a child. It's one thing when you read it, something else when you see it on TV. Remember that commercial where the scientists were like in the car watching the movie?
In the car commercial watching the movie, just watching old Yeller, and they're all crying back there. It's like they just, you know what?
Yes. and everybody's like devastated. You have to be careful about that with children's films.
I can honestly say I haven't seen Old Yeller, but Mom said, and Falcon here says that I don't want to.
No, sorry.
I've heard tons of references to it, but
I think we could skip that one in the classic literature category just once. Knowing how you are with
I love
animals.
Dogs, and we're not going to talk anymore because Prince is here. And
exactly, but we do have to talk about some upsetting doggy news this week, and that is. Who in the world came up with the brilliant idea of using dogs, raccoon dogs, not raccoons, mind you, raccoon dogs. They look like raccoons, but they're dogs, and wolves for fur to go around the collars of coats, bring them into the U.S., and try to sell them on our shelves. It's illegal, people. Here's what I have to say to the buyers. You said you trust the way these people label the stuff and that you're hoping they're going to do it right. Why would that be? Not that we've ever had a history of improper labeling. But I would certainly make sure if I'm the buyer for a major department store, I'm going to pick up that sample coat and I'm going to part that hair and I'm going to look to make darn sure that it's artificial hair and not from some endangered species or somebody's pet. Now, whatever anybody does, every culture is different. And you are absolutely cool to be cool with your culture wherever you are. But if you know that you got something you're going to sell someplace else where it's not cool, you have to follow the rules and respect them. If they ask you, hey, is this real animal fur? Tell them the truth. And here's why. They're going to respect you for telling them the truth. You're going to be able to come to an understanding of things that you can do to make changes so that you can continue business. Now what's going to happen is a whole lot of people are going to be upset. The American Humane Society is really upset. They're asking for a cut down, pulling and confiscating product. How does that do the manufacturer any good? It doesn't, okay? If it's become that expensive to do fake fur around the collar, I've got a brilliant idea. Let's go furless. How about no fur around the collar of these hats? I mean, let's be honest. That stuff is decorating for the most part. You're not really looking for it to satisfy. And I mean, around the coats I'm talking about. You know the coats we mean. The coats are mostly made out of something synthetic anyway. They have some sort of thinsulate inside, some piling, some nylon stitching.
Stay that way.
You know, come on. You don't need any fake fur around the hat.
Do you know where
it's not that fashionable.
Do you know where they say they got these from? These coats?
Most of them are from China. And I know we have a lot of loyal listeners in China, and it has nothing to do with that. It's just about labeling products properly. Don't say that it's fake fur when it's real fur, because some people have allergies. And then they're going to throw this coat on, and then they're going to get sick and rashes, or worse, asthma triggers, and not know what in the world's going on. Now that's affecting their medication and their lifestyle. And some of these are children. So come on, gang. Fairness in advertising here. Don't use the animals for the fur collars and ship it to the U.S. Not cool, not cool. That's why we have laws in place.
Whoever's responsible for shipping these to the stores.
And for that certain chain who actually had the coats, pulled the coats, put them back on, and then tried to Sharpie pen out the fact that it was properly labeled.
Now that was even worse.
That was evil. J.C. Penney. That was evil. Don't do that.
Sharpie penning, yeah.
That should have been done by your buyer when they looked and said, oh my gosh, this has raccoon dog, not raccoon dog, fur on it. Not cool.
Even if it had been a raccoon, I would have had a problem with that.
Leave
the dang raccoon alone.
You know, I could imagine I could have an allergic reaction to that. I mean, the bottom line is, tell the truth. Tell the truth, be fair, then everybody has a better trade policy, and then everybody benefits. But now, everything's going to get all icky and nasty, and the orders for fall are going to be affected, and there's going to be inspections, and even confiscations, and, you know, it could have just all been avoided by just being truthful and either using synthetics, proper labeling, or, hey, I got a Columbia jacket that's pretty cool, and it has no fur on it. And I was very, very warm this winter. As a matter of fact, I was sultry. I was downright hot.
Thank you, Columbia.
Thank you, Columbia. You make ace jackets, and I don't have any fake fur on it. Or real fur. Or sort of real, but not properly labeled. Anyway, that's the Falcon rant for the week. I am all for positive trade among countries. I am all for making sure that we all enfranchise. But we have to watch how we do it. We have to respect each other. That's all I'm saying.
Falcon's rant of the week. All right, next up we've got a very mysterious and kind of funny in a sort of weird way.
It's only funny because everything's okay.
Yeah, that's only
and
funny.
And that's why it's kind of funny. If everything wasn't okay, it would not be funny.
Yeah, have you guessed it yet? Yeah. Okay. A nuclear sub, the San Juan, disappeared off radio, satellite, and cellular phone for nearly 10 hours.
Disappeared.
Off
satellite.
Just disappeared.
For
10 hours.
10
Overnight.
Hours. Yeah.
Families were notified that the sub might be sunk, but it emerged without anyone on board realizing that there was a problem.
Now, what wasn't cool was that they called the families in the middle of the night and said, oh, by the way, your loved ones may be on a sub that's sunk. That was not good. Cool. Not cool at all.
Exactly. So, thanks to ABC News here, I'll read a short snippet out of this thing. The Navy mobilized a search and rescue operation Tuesday night after it believed one of its submarines, the USS San Juan, had gone missing off the coast of Florida with 140 crew members aboard. Communications were reestablished early this morning, and it all appears to have been a case of miscommunication. The concern was so high that Defense Secretary Robert Gates was notified of the situation overnight, as was White House National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley, who was preparing to brief President Bush with the news when communications were reestablished with the missing submarine. The Navy had also begun notifying the families of the 141 crew members that the submarine was missing. The incident is under investigation, with the focus being on why the ship missed a pre-established communications period with surface ships. Communications with the submarine were first lost at 7 p.m. Tuesday and were finally reestablished by 5 a.m. today. This was then. The ship reported no problems, and both crew and officers were unaware of the effort underway to locate them. That's a little snippet out of that.
Yeah. It was off the coast of Jacksonville.
Goes on for 2 pages.
That's a very large body of water off the coast of Florida.
What do you think this was about, Falcon?
Well, the funny thing is, they didn't think they had missed a communications period. Now, maybe it was just that they didn't check in at the proper time, or that maybe something happened with their transmitters aboard. But for 10 hours, nobody could get a bleep on this thing. And it's a very large nuclear submarine.
It's huge.
And you would prefer to not lose that. That's pretty critical. The good news is everybody's fine. Everybody's PG. Everybody on board, all 145 were like, what? We're cool. So
what I want to know is, did they know they had been missing for 10 hours?
They say they didn't. They say they did not know.
Did they even know what time it was to them?
Now, there's a question.
That's what I was thinking.
There's a question, because that very large body right off Jacksonville and off the coast of Florida has been lovingly called for years the Bermuda Triangle. And stuff like this happens all the time there. Of course, this was a larger one, so it was, publicized. Nobody wanted to say the BT words. And of course, it wasn't mentioned in the article. But, when it disappears where it disappeared, one must say the BT thing. And
so we're going to say it.
We're going to say it.
Bermuda Triangle.
Is it that I mean, I would think with today's technology, with GPS, GIS, satellite photography, cell phone communication, this came up this week with respect to the issue of the souls lost in the Sago mine disaster in West Virginia, about having shelters underground that these men can go to, and cellular communication. And an excellent point was brought up by one of the United Mine Workers. I believe it was the international president. He said, hey, if we can put guys up in space on the moon, why can't we get underwater communications to work? And I would pose the same question here. How, what goes on there? Is it electromagnetic energy? Is it simply, wave constructs? What is it that makes it so easy to lose a nuclear sub?
Yeah. To lose communication, radar, everything.
For 10 hours.
For 10 hours.
This is 2007. We're supposed to have very advanced
radar is radar. If it disappears off radar, then something weird's afoot.
What is it, the Vulcan cloaking device? What were they using that they couldn't find them for 10 hours? So, I'm with the guy, I believe it was the UAW international president, who said, we have to have better communications underground. And I would add underwater. We need to make sure that we don't, these guys told these people's families their sub might be sunk.
Yeah.
Now, 2 hours later, they said, hey, we're okay, everybody's all right. But that's horrific. And you would prefer, and in the Sago mine disaster, once finding them, someone through a series of communications actually said, well, they were found, but assumed they were all right. And the fact is that only one survived.
Right.
And that is horrifically sad. So we need to improve the way that if they're technologically, we should have the best and brightest minds on this, on environmental epidemiology, and on global warming. I mean, here's the top 3 areas where we need to be paying the greatest amount of attention, because if we don't pay attention to this stuff, the rest of it kind of becomes moot.
Right, and I agree. But what I am concerned about is if they put communication wires or technology underwater, however they do it, would that even work in the Bermuda Triangle, considering everything seems to not work? No matter any kind of our technology doesn't seem to work in there at all. So,
well, old technology didn't work because, of course, it was easily affected by magnetism, and of course there are other waves that seem to emulate through that area that can affect electronic equipment. And you bring up an excellent point. What do we need to do? What do we need to put into place?
Right, isn't there something that we can do to counter the electromagnetic influences of the Bermuda Triangle?
Well, you wonder, do these guys, when they're surface, do they have the ability to do Wi-Fi? And maybe what we need is an underwater Wi-Fi. And get some really smart minds.
And maybe someone's already doing that, and
maybe
we just
somebody
don't know.
Is, and we don't know about it. But I think that in this day and age, to lose something of that size, importance, critical mass, underwater for that period of time.
And the people on board having no clue that anyone is worrying about them.
Which means 2 things. One, if they sent communications out in a timely manner at the appointed time, no one got it. 2, no inquiries that were made by the Coast Guard, the military, or anyone, and the Navy got in. So they didn't know, because their communications that went out weren't received, nor were they receiving the communications of, hey, you guys all right? So there was a significant period where they were completely
there's still a lot more that we don't know about this story. We didn't hear anything about the people on board. They haven't seemed to interviewed anybody publicly.
Right.
Who
well,
was
it's
on
military,
board.
and you're going to be security focused.
Right, security focused, exactly.
But it makes you
just
wonder.
The fact that they didn't know that anyone was worried about them. I'd like to know if they knew how long they were gone.
Yes, because there have been more than one report of individuals, one very well documented, who flew through the Bermuda Triangle and basically took a 3-hour trip and turned it into a 40-minute trip.
Right, exactly. He saw land, and he was wondering what the heck this island was, and it turned out to be Florida. He's like, whoa! I'm way too close to Florida. I shouldn't be here now. I should just be seeing water for the next 3 hours, and instead he got to Florida in 40 minutes, and which was a mystery.
Yes, because it's clear what time he left. He's logged in. He was in Bermuda airspace. How did he make
There's
that
no way
trip?
that you can explain that. There's no shortcut around there.
Well,
the shortcut is the Bermuda Triangle.
Vortex, sandworms. I don't know what you're going to look for, but certainly there has to be a way to make sure that we can keep our critical forces in communication above ground, underground, and underwater. And anybody out there who is a super genius and is interested in figuring out a way to make these communication forms work more consistently, we have thousands and thousands of miners underground in this country risking their lives every day for coal, for power plants to keep your lights on. And United Mine Workers Union has said that they are consolidated in the idea that if they can't do it safely, they shouldn't do it. And, being from Pennsylvania, my grandfather was a coal miner. Then he went on to work in the mills. He spent 47 years doing very, very, very dangerous work. And I don't think you could go very far in this region in the Northeast without tapping someone who has a relative or friend who works in the mining industry. Mm-hmm. And it is critical that we come up with viable technology to protect the people who do this kind of work. It is critical that we make sure that our men and women who are serving on submarines in very deep, dark places in the ocean are reachable, mm-hmm. and that we have a very clearly set criteria of what happens if somebody misses a communication time.
Right, and I just thought of something interesting. Wasn't the plane that was a couple of years ago that got to Florida in 40 minutes? Wasn't that going from east to west? It was going from east to west, correct? Over the Atlantic?
East to west, that's correct.
East to west, and the submarine was kind of going west to east, kind of in a little south. And the plane got to Florida in a faster amount of time, and the submarine took a slower amount of time. You think if there is a vortex that it kind of works like that, depending on which direction you're going through the triangle?
I've always said that you were a genius. And because I don't have my formulas on quantum physics in front of me at this moment, and I don't have my buddy Stephen on speed dial anymore, but I'm sure Stephen Hawking would be fascinated in the idea.
Yeah, I think it's like a black hole.
Well, let me put it this way. There are, for example, your jet streams. If you're flying from east to west, it takes a bit longer than if you're flying from west to east.
But the plane was going from west to east. East to west, and it got there shorter time. That's the thing.
Okay, so it's opposite of air currents.
Right.
Well, if you believe there must be an equal and opposite reaction. You could believe that jet currents could be in inverse proportion to some other unseen current that could
current or some sort
alter time-space continuum in some sort of vortex or earthbound gravity-centered wormhole. Mm-hmm. That's a very, very complicated.
Right. The only way. Thank you. And the only way reason why I think I compare it to a black hole is that they discuss this on the Science Channel or the Discovery Channel, is when something goes into a black hole. Say an orange goes into a black hole. If someone were watching the orange going into the black hole, it'd be looking like it was spinning and becoming a blur and a spinning blur, and then essentially become non-existent anymore. But then
super dense.
But to the orange going in, it feels like nothing has happened.
That has been the big black hole debate.
Isn't that
what happens on the
debate.
lip? Yeah. What happens when you go in?
If you're going
what happens to matter?
If you're going in, I don't think you cease to exist. I think that you're just fine. It just looks like to other people that something has happened to you, and then you're gonna come out the other side all right.
Which brings up the submarine scenario.
With the submarine, they felt like nothing was wrong, but meanwhile, the people who were on the coast, they were looking and they had disappeared off radar. They had essentially become a blur or invisible mm-hmm. to them. But really nothing was wrong. Well, physically.
you bring up an interesting point. Can we take what happens in empirical space and apply it to what happens in Earth gravitational pull with electromagnetic field and force? And we don't really know how certain aspects of electromagneticity function. Mm-hmm. We pretend that we know.
Yeah, I think really this vortex, Bermuda Triangle, functions, if it really is a vortex, as a magnetically. Do black holes, are they magnetic?
No. Not dense, yes. Okay. It's density that pulls, not gravitational. Okay. Now, we have some extremely smart people who listen to the show. Yes. So, will some of those extremely smart people send some email and let us know what you think in theory, might be why or how the submarine was out of contact, and further, and more importantly, how do we improve underground and underwater communications with surface and air?
Give us your theories. Even if it's like completely off the wall, we want it. We want to hear it.
And you can send that to...
You can send that to Falcon Dove. That's FALCONDOVE at AreaSimmons.com. AREYASIMMONS.com. Send us your theories.
Well done. A very good theory. A very good point. Could things change by directional positioning? It works in air currents. Wonder if it works in other ways. That's why I had you. You know? I tease her about that all the time. All these brilliant reasons why I had her.
Yeah, every time I do something brilliant, she says,
yeah.
That's why
Parents, tell your kids every day they're brilliant.
Yes,
they might actually start believing it.
Yeah.
They might. You never know.
Okay, next we have a hidden financial tax break thing.
Oh, yes. This is something that parents can get information off of FastWeb about. It's funny because the way this article started is that there's millions of dollars of scholarship money that goes wanting every year, but actually that's a myth. Actually, to a certain extent, maybe not for the scholarships on FastWeb, but it's still true to a certain extent where with larger scholarships in localized areas, those, and of course the nice small ones too, those still go wanting sometimes because there aren't people who know that these are available, or they don't get enough applicants in order to meet the criteria to disperse. So that is actually still true. But FastWeb has $22 billion in scholarships on there, or something like that. I say there's enough for everybody.
Yeah, I went to the website. It said something like 2.8 or 3 million scholarships. But
yes, but they are valued at like $22 billion. There's plenty for everybody. And in this case, in this article, what they're referring to are issues where parents don't necessarily know about your tax breaks. And since this is tax season, parents and students who are independent, I want you to pay very, very close attention to this because this is really, really, really important. Mm-hmm. There are tax breaks you're probably not taking. And there's a difference between a tax credit and a tax break. And there's also a difference between the earned income tax credit as it's applied to issues of deduction and tuition versus lifetime learning credit, which can be applied not only to the kid who may be going off to college, but to you parents who may be taking a class here or a class there, who don't realize that you actually get some tax credit for this. So, Dove, explain to them a little bit about how this all works from fastweb.com, courtesy of fastweb.com.
Yes, courtesy of FastWeb. A common scholarship myth is that millions of dollars go unclaimed each year, and it is exactly that, a myth. But there's another way to save money that has gone untapped by thousands of students and their families, a source of help hidden in plain sight. It's so hidden, students fail to take advantage of millions of dollars in benefits, according to a recent government study. What is the hidden financial gem? A tax break. A report filed by the Government Accountability Office found 27% of eligible tax filers did not claim either the tuition deduction or a tax credit. The report in the news when the GAO delivered testimony in a December 2006 U.S. Senate hearing also says tax filers failed to reduce their tax liability by $169 on average, and 10% of these filers could have reduced their tax liability by over $500. That's a lot of money to leave on the table. So, why did 27% of all eligible tax filers decide to forego a chance to save on their education? While the report does not provide a specific reason, it speculates that the apparently suboptimal use of post-secondary tax preferences may arise in part from the complexity of using these provisions. Translation: figuring out the tax code is really hard.
There you go. Your tax preparer might not even realize that you are eligible. If you don't, it's not the typical question a tax preparer asks. So if you don't get a statement from the university where your child or you attended this year, and remember, we're talking about 2-year, 4-year, certificate, vocational, any kind of coursework of that nature is impacted, and you can receive a tax credit and or deduction. So, 2 things here. One, if you took a class last year and it was $300-400, maybe more if you took it for credit, get that statement that should have been sent by the university that says, oh, here's your year-end statement of what you spent and when you paid us and how you paid us for that class that you had, or the statement for your students, which you should get automatically, and go to your tax preparer and say, hey, did you count my lifetime learning credit, or did you count this deduction? Because it can make a really big difference. One can impact in how many taxes you owe, and you subtract it away. The other is, a dollar for dollar issue. So some are percentage, some are dollar for dollar. Talk to your tax preparer, or if you've got one of those home prepared kits, punch in lifetime learning credit, tuition credit. Make sure that you don't miss this deduction, because this would mean a lot of money for you. So, want to make sure everybody gets their money. If you need to get a bigger refund, you deserve a bigger refund, you should have a bigger refund. That's what I always say.
And next up we have a different topic, binge drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of college.
Binge drinking. Apparently, a study done by Columbia University over the past few years says college students are just getting completely stupid when it comes to binge drinking and drug usage and prescription drug abuse.
Okay, this is courtesy of MSNBC. Substance abuse on college campuses is nothing new, but it is taking a more extreme and dangerous form with higher rates of frequent binge drinking and prescription drug abuse, and more negative consequences for students such as arrests and risky sexual behavior. That's the portrait painted by a new comprehensive report tying together a range of recent research on college substance abuse, supplemented with some of its own new survey data. The report by the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University argues substance abuse isn't an inevitable rite of passage for young adults. Rather, it argues a particular culture of excessive consumption has flourished on college campuses and calls on educators to take bolder stands against students and alumni to combat it.
Yeah, it's huge. This is nothing new. I was in college 30 years ago, and I can tell you that I always thought it was funny that the small college town I was in the top 5% of alcohol sales for the state, and 95% of the population was under 21.
I love how on here they have
9 months out of the year.
I love how they have a health quiz on here. Do you have a drinking problem? Click here.
Well, let's see. Let's see what stage of acceptance they're actually in.
Here's the.
We'll say, of course not.
Here's the highlights of the study. The proportion of students who drink about 68% and binge drink 40% has changed little since 1993.
Okay, that's important. Pause. Parents, students, 68% of college students admit to some form of binge drinking. Of drinking.
40% admit to binge drinking. 68% admit to drinking.
Now, I also noticed some other statistics in this study, which was parents, you could be slightly relieved in the fact that colleges and universities and students who are residing in the dorms are less likely to participate in that kind of behavior. Actually, it's about 10% for binge drinking and about 26% for just regular old drinking. And it's the same low numbers when you start talking about doing marijuana and other things, because let's face it, you can't really do marijuana in a dorm without everyone else knowing about it. something about that wafting smell that is unique to marijuana. And of course, there is an issue, of course, of prescription drug abuse as well, and that's a little harder to detect. But it's much lower for students who live in the dorms than it is for students who live in off-campus housing.
Yeah.
But the place it's the worst are the Greek fraternity and sorority houses. Now, you would think that those houses are usually part of on campus, that they would have to be careful too. For the ones that are off campus, I guess it's, girls and boys gone wild. Your statistics are scary. So here's the thing. It is not a rite of passage to ruin your liver while in college. It really, really isn't.
Very good statement there.
And these days, you could have your beer or, the old grain alcohol in the giant lined garbage can routine. But you don't know what somebody else put in that. They could put GHB in there, and a few other things. And before you know it, you've woken up the next day and you have no idea where you've been. If you've woken up the next day, because there have been some problems there with that.
Just stay away from all of it. Too much junk comes with it.
It's ridiculous.
Stay away from the drugs, the alcohol,
you can enjoy college thoroughly
and not drink
without getting yourself schnockered to the point where you don't know what you're doing.
And that's the word of the week.
Schnockered.
Schnockered.
It's just, you're going to be walking down the street saying, who are you? You don't want to do that. You're going to sound like Roger Daltrey, Listen to the words of that song, okay? The guy's been in the drunk tank all night, and he's hoping he can go home on the subway and his wife will take him back. Okay? That's not the way to live. Yeah, believe me, when you wake up with that massive headache and your tongue feels like it belongs to a porcupine, you are not going to be
You can have fun.
I'm living the college life. You
can have fun and not drink or any of that. You can actually have fun and party all you want, and not drink. Imagine that.
Imagine what will happen when you actually remember the name of the really cute girl you met the night before, whom you can't remember. So you don't have to go to your other friends and your roommate. Oh, man, what was that girl's name? I don't know, man. Didn't she have, brown hair? I don't know. I think so. Oh, come on. What house was she from? I don't know.
Looked like she had
of course they don't know, because they all drank the same thing you did.
Looked like she had a fudgesicle on her head.
Yeah. I mean, ladies.
But in all seriousness,
want to make a good impression, you will make a better impression if you don't smell like the bottom of a New York City taxi cab. Okay? Beer, ale, and gin do not make a good combination when meeting a hot, sexy guy. So, look, guys, curtail this.
You need your liver. You're going to need that after college.
You really are. You really are. You're going to need it. You're going to need your brain cells.
Yeah.
Next on the topics, the defective pumps used to protect New Orleans. What happened in the Gulf Coast states is a microcosm of a much, 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 much larger problem. And that is that when it comes to really preparing for natural disasters and putting things in place the way they should be to protect large populations, collectively, we kind of stink at it. Let's call it what it is. We've known since 1969 that the levees were completely inappropriate for New Orleans for a Category 3 or higher hurricane. Well, when Katrina actually hit the coast, she was a 3, thinking about becoming a 2. Not a 5 anymore. If she had hit as a 5, I can't even begin to articulate what could have happened. So, here's what we need to do. We need to put our best and brightest on this, and we need to put the best equipment in place to protect the population that pays the taxes, that pays for people to do all this research to protect them. That's why we actually have a federal government. We have a federally localized government so we can pool our so-called resources to benefit the greatest amount of people, us. So when I hear that defective pumps were put in New Orleans last year and that they're running around like maniacs trying to get these pumps fixed with better parts or replace them altogether, and that they were left susceptible once again to the 2006 hurricane season, good thing it wasn't a bad one, I think, what are we doing and what are we paying for? You know, how crazy is it going to have to get for us to get really upset about this kind of waste? This is our money. We want our money to protect our people. And we shouldn't be wasting it on defective products just because somebody's friend or uncle or cousin or whomever knows some company who has these available. You know, we need to be working for the best. Remember once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away when in America we said we want to do the absolute best job we can do. Not because we're getting a big fat paycheck for it, but because doing your best job and signing your name to it was something that gave you personal pride. Now, I know there are millions of Americans right now who go out every day and give 110% in whatever they do. The guy at the produce shop who's owned that little produce corner for 30, 40, 50 years, he got it from his father, who got it from his father, and he makes sure every day he's up at 4:30 a.m. and he gets down to the docks and he gets the best stuff for his customers, and he's waiting on the same people in the same neighborhood that he has waited on for years. And the neighborhood's face may change, but he has stayed strong. He has put in bulletproof glass where he needed to, and he's gone to council meetings to change the neighborhood, but he is proud of what he does. There are people who have small mechanic shops who still work on old 73 Thunderbirds, who do the best job they can do every day. There are folks out there who are running their own businesses from home, selling stuff on eBay, or making jewelry, or making art, or doing whatever it is they can do to put together enough for the car payment, the house payment, and paid their taxes on time. And they do it every day. It is time for our government to do the same thing for us because they work for us. I don't want to hear any more business about defective pumps or inappropriate pumps being placed down in the Gulf Coast as ineffective, defective product that is going to put more of our people at risk. These people deserve the same protection as anybody else. This is the United States of America, and we are supposed to be an international example for excellence. And this is not an international example for excellence. When I hear stories like this, this is an international example of what others shouldn't do. We should be ashamed that we have allowed things to get like this. But it is time for us to step up to the plate. And I think that a lot of what happened in the November elections was not so much necessarily people voting for A candidate or B candidate. In some instances it was. But a lot of it is about dissatisfaction with the way our government behaves with respect to us. Well, this is another microcosm of that. We could have another vicious hurricane season this year. How many people do we have to lose before we say, you know, this is despicable and we're not going to put up with it? It's our money. Our money. We worked hard for that money. We give it to the government to protect us, to assist us, and to assist our fellow Americans when they have problems with A, B, or C. So they need a hand getting back up on their feet.
Our government kind of glanced at something like that after Katrina, but then it started to die away.
The way Katrina was handled
about working a little better
was abominable from a federal level. And I'm not talking about the national and international organizations. I'm not talking about the National Guard, who did a spectacular job during the hurricanes. Props to the National Guard, who did a spectacular job with not enough people and worked ridiculously awful schedules to make sure that the people of the Gulf Coast were getting what they needed when they needed it. And the local organizations who pulled together, churches, and who pulled together and got blankets out there, got water out there. Mm-hmm. You know, our communities, we are used to picking each other up. Well, we have to think about our country as a neighborhood. And, you know, we cannot let a certain portion of our neighborhood slip because we have individuals who are just slacking off and not paying attention to the things that need to be done.
Right, Katrina kind of brought out some of the best in people and what they did in some of the worst.
Exactly. And, you know, there are people living in Mississippi and Alabama and Florida and Louisiana. And, you know, these people have worked all their lives to have what they have or to have lost what they lost. And they didn't just lose property. They lost friends, relatives, grandmothers, grandfathers, brothers, sisters, cousins, pets. They lost. They have a heart wound. Do not insult our intelligence and do not disrespect them by putting equipment down there that is ineffective. We need to put the best foot forward, and that means we need to have an open bidding process for these contracts so that Americans who make good materials can once again show off their excellence. And that will be the piece that puts in place. You know, it's really not that hard to make things better. But the hardest thing it's going to be is to get up off the couch and do something. So,
political when we will, see stuff like Al Gore this, says, political will.
You know, and you know, let's be proactive, not reactive. Now, my proactivity is I have already contacted some folks and said, what in the world's going on there? How are these defective pieces getting put in? And why were they defective to begin with? And saying, well, you know, wasn't really any big deal. Nobody was really at risk. The only reason they weren't at risk is because we had a good year.
Right. According to this article, again, MSNBC, the Army Corps of Engineers, they were rushing to meet President Bush's promise to protect New Orleans by the start of 2006 hurricane season and installed the defective flood control pumps last year, despite warnings from its own expert that the equipment would fail during a storm.
Well, here's the thing. We couldn't find any good pumps anywhere. There got to be some good pumps somewhere. You know, if their own people were saying, hey,
we're one of the richest countries in the world. You can't get pumps.
You know, I am sure that we could get some good pumps made somewhere. And I'm sure that we could put a whole lot of good, hardworking Americans to work making those pumps. You know, I bet we could.
Yeah.
And I bet they make more than they would, you know, working 2 and 3 minimum wage jobs with no health benefits, because that's what we got going right now, too. And that's the other thing we got to stand up for. We have to stand up for getting some serious national health care in place. You think it's socialist? Well, quit crying in your towel. I'm tired of hearing every time somebody talks about getting a national anything in place that it's socialist. You know what? Let it be. It is ridiculous in this country that you can get a prescription program to cover Viagra, but you don't have a prescription program to cover your eyeglasses. Not unless you're on Medicare or Medicaid. So it's time for us to stand up and say, you know, some things have got to change. Defective won't work. Not covering our illnesses won't work. You want us to be out there working every day. There are people out there working every day trying to keep food on the table for the kids, clothes on their backs, and they're running themselves into the ground. Because they're working 3 minimum wage jobs that don't pay them enough money to buy health insurance. And health insurance shouldn't be so expensive. Health insurance spread among the masses. Just imagine if you could make it affordable and spread it among the masses. We would have more people covered. They would have wellness programs in place and preventative medicine in place instead of only going to the doctor or the emergency room when they're on their last leg.
Right, and now the little guy is smarter than the big guys working, and they're taking their small business and making it even bigger, and working making their business even bigger and bigger and bigger, using the internet to sell their stuff and becoming millionaires, and then hopefully pretty soon those will be the people making these decisions.
You bring up an interesting point, because are we at a tipping point in terms of the way we do business globally? Are we at the point where it is going to become more important to deal with small, independent, self-starter individuals who, some of them still can't buy their own health insurance.
Right now they're more intelligent.
But as they become more fluent, we may create an entirely different business structure.
Right, these little guys are self-teaching themselves to learning the business, and get, thanks to the internet mostly, and learning to make a bigger business.
And they're learning the same way we've learned over hundreds and even thousands of years, as trade changes, as policies change, as dynamics change. And that is the spirit of the entrepreneur. That's the spirit of the hardworking person. And that's what makes our country great. That's what makes so many countries great. It is being able to apply yourself to something and be proud of the work that you do. And our country needs to start remembering how its bread gets buttered. And it gets buttered on the backs of people just like that. The small entrepreneur, the small produce shop owner, the mechanic, the bakery owner, the entrepreneurs selling stuff on eBay, the one making the jewelry. Those are the people that make this country. So we need to respect them and put forward policies that are going to put the greatest number of them to work at the highest possible benefit level. That way, everybody benefits. Nobody loses any money. Nobody loses. Not even the rich guys. Nobody loses. Everybody just gets better. We really do not need to have a thriving underclass of poverty and denigration in order to be a successful country. We really don't. We could actually do it a different way. And if we don't start doing that voluntarily, we may end up doing that because we have no choice. Let's make positive choices before we've painted ourselves into a really nasty corner. Hope this year's hurricane season is nice and calm too. I don't think it will be, but I hope it's nice and calm, and I hope we take better care of our people. I hope we've learned something.
Right. Our final topic of the week. This is interesting. This is from Radio New Zealand News. Hello, if we have any listeners down there. This article is about large booksellers going unread in Europe and other places. They did a poll or something, and they took the top 10 most bought books but unread. Unread
that's
books.
Weird. So they buy them but they don't read them?
Top 10 fiction titles and top 10 non-fiction titles. So here it is. Let's see. The average Britons spend more than £4,000, $11,000, on books during their lifetime, but nearly half remain unread, according to a new study. Researchers commissioned by Teletext interviewed 4,000 Britons and found that a fifth of all readers skip the childhood details and dive straight to heart of biographies. Booker Prize-winning murder mystery Vernon God Little by Australian Peter Warren Finley, who writes as DBC Pierre, topped the list of works of fiction which readers would not complete. More than a third of those who bought or borrowed the bestseller admitted they did not finish it.
That's bizarre.
Just under a third, 32% of adult readers, admitted they did not get to the end of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. James Joyce's Ulysses was third, with 28% of those giving up.
I've gotten all the way through Ulysses. It wasn't that bad.
Nonfiction failures. That's what the article says. The nonfiction list is topped by former Home Secretary David Blunkett's autobiography, The Blunkett Tapes, which proved too much for 35% of readers. Bill Clinton takes second place, losing 30% of readers before they finish the 1,024 pages of My Life. David Beckham, My Side, which won a British Book Award for the fastest-selling autobiography of all time, is third with 27%.
Is that like the soccer guy?
Yeah, David Beckham.
He wrote an autobiography already. Wow, I didn't even know that. I gotta get that. I like soccer. I didn't even know he wrote a book. See, I gotta advertise that better. That's the problem. See, they just didn't advertise it very well, and I understand that people are busy. People are busy.
Yeah. Now this is interesting. More than half of those surveyed, as in 2000, admitted they often buy books for decoration and have no intention of actually reading them. The report found attention spans have shrunk in the digital age, with 42% admitting they are unable to concentrate on long-winded tomes. Many also revealed they found it difficult to dedicate time to reading for pleasure, with 48% saying they were too tired.
I can understand that one.
Now, here we go. Here's the, I'm going to read you the top 10 fiction titles and the top 10 non-fiction titles. Top 10 fiction titles, Vernon God Little, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Ulysses, Captain Corelli's Mandolin, Cloud Atlas, The Satanic Verses, The Alchemist, War and Peace, The God of Small Things, and Crime and Punishment. Those are the top 10 books but that were not read, not finished. And the top 10 non-fiction titles.
I only had 2 of those. I have Ulysses and I have War and Peace. I've actually gotten through both of them. You've
gone through Ulysses
and War and Peace.
Okay.
And only 2 on that whole list that I have. And I'm not going to buy a book I'm not going to read. I'll tell you what.
That's stupid. Yeah, we don't buy books that we're not going to read. I mean, you still have yet to get through Aragon.
Yeah, well, I bought it at a sale where I bought like a caseload of books, to be honest. Not that I do that every day or anything, but, they were there and they were on sale and there were so many. And, so yeah, I'm taking my time getting through them. And no, I didn't get to read Aragon yet, but I'm going to.
Yes, the thing, you're all right because you haven't actually started it yet. These people started it and then didn't finish it. Okay, and the top 10 non-fiction titles are The Blunkett Tapes, My Life, My Side, Eats, Shoots, and Leaves, Wild Swans, Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. Oh, you wonder why people stopped reading that. Yeah. People can't kick the habit. Okay.
Or they did and they stopped.
Right. Yeah. Number 7, the Downing Street Years, I Can Make You Thin, Jade, my autobiography, and Why Don't Penguins' Feet Freeze?
Wow. I have to say, I don't have, well, I think that maybe one of those books I actually have. I haven't read any of those books on the nonfiction We Don't Get to Finish list, which is probably why I don't have them, because I only get books that I think I'm actually going to read. I don't get books with the intention of like impressing people who come over and go, wow, look at the books on your shelf. Mm-hmm. Now, I know a guy who 1 year, this is not a joke, he spent like $11,000 on books in a single year. And I have no idea when he's ever going to get around. He bought like a library's worth of books. And I don't know when he's going to get around to reading them. And I can tell you, I bet he's not going to actually read them cover to cover. And, a lot of them were collectible of, first editions or a signed copy or something like that. But I got to tell you, if I'm going to buy the book, I'm going to read the book. And, once you take it out of the library, you might as well read it, because now you're on a time limit. You got to get it in,
right.
in just a couple weeks. So you might as well read it.
If you're in school, it's a little more strict. But
it is, and you don't have a lot of free time.
But you should read for pleasure.
You should read for pleasure.
When you get a chance, you should read for pleasure. We are for literacy.
I think if you're in college and you find that you're not getting to read for pleasure, join one of those clubs, because usually if somebody has a reading club on campus, especially
reading group,
for more popular books and materials, and that way, at least you get something.
Even online reading groups.
Exactly.
Online reading groups.
Exactly.
That are more flexible.
Many ways to keep reading and keep learning. I want to make sure I'm learning something new every day.
Yes.
If for no other reason, as a baby boomer, if I learn something new today, then that means I've dropped something else out of the old RAM disk, because I keep saying that the disk is full, so I can't put anything else in there.
Your disk is not full.
So if I learn something new every day, it provides me the opportunity to dump something that I don't need anymore. So it's great. It's really great. Until I need it again.
That. I don't believe that. If you want to compare our brains and our memories with disks, I think it's the fact that we forget things, but we're still consuming more knowledge. It's not the fact that we don't have any space left for anything new. It depends on how we save them.
Well, I can tell you
know
that we save them in really, really weird ways.
Yeah, we humans save things in our computer disks very weird ways.
In really strange ways. Because I can still remember the jingles to TV shows that haven't been on since I was a kid, and I haven't heard 30 years, and all the words. I still remember the jingles. I remember all the words.
Yeah.
Now, what that should tell you, young people, is that you shouldn't fill your heads with themes from Nanny and the Professor and Gilligan's Island solely. You should actually take this time to learn really brilliant things, because then, when you're older, you will remember them and have retained them.
Right. Now, like with TV shows or something, as a simple example, like don't exactly try to remember the entire show. Just remember what it taught you.
Yeah.
Because then that kind of like compresses your disc for all you technology people out there.
Yeah.
It compresses your disc.
I like that. Compresses my disc. Not the discs in my back, just the discs in my memory. Yeah, so that I can store more things.
So you can store more.
Disc.
Yeah, because you want to keep the lessons. You want to keep the lessons of it.
Because as a baby boomer, I have tons of useless trivial information stored away in my head. You can ask me any trivia question to any bizarre thing from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and maybe 90s, and I can answer it for you. But ask me something actually pertinent to real life that happened last week, and I'll go, huh?
Right, now all those savants out there who seem to be like walking, talking encyclopedias, their memories seem to be infinity terabytes.
And speaking of memory, did you hear about the guy on 314, because that is Pi Day, who actually memorized pi to 100,000 places. 100,000 places. First of all, I have other things to memorize. But that's impressive, because it probably took him I know that there was that one young guy who is rather intuitively savant, who visualizes numbers to exponential places.
Right, he doesn't actually memorize them or do any of the math in his head. He just visualizes.
He visualizes the answers to very, very complex mathematical problems. That's amazing. But this guy, 100,000 places of pi. And at the end of the day, you go, okay, and what am I going to do with that? Okay, does that improve my memory? And I guess that's the real question. Does doing things like that improve my memory? I know that I enjoy...
Yeah, I think it does. That little brain teasers and tricks and stuff.
Yeah, I enjoy
sharpen
games
your
a
memory.
lot. Yes.
Yeah, sharpen your memory, like games like Solitaire and...
Solitaire, backgammon, those kinds of things.
I whomp you in 500 rum.
Yes, she did. I hadn't played in a long time. She whomped me.
I hadn't played since I was 9 years old, and she had to reteach me how to play 500 rum, and the first two games we played, I beat her. And it all came back to me.
Yeah.
And I remember beating my grandma all the time when I was young. Once I knew the rules, then I developed my strategy, which I will not give away.
And see, that's the other thing, too. Grandma, and even great-grandma, who was over 100 when she passed away last year, sharp as a tack. Sharp as a tack. Ask her anything about anything. She could memorize people on TV and who played in Duke Ellington's band and what year and who was the second trumpet and blah, 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 because she always challenged herself to learn something new every day. So I guess if we get a book, we should read the book.
Yeah.
We should not stop. And if we're not going to finish
and absorb what we have. Yeah,
give it to somebody.
If you need to, reread it. If you need, or better yet, the first time you read it slowly. I know there's people who can speed read out there, but absorb it. Make sure you actually absorb the things and not just the obvious facts that the book is giving your eyeballs.
There's nothing wrong with rereading a book because sometimes you get additional information.
Heck
and perspective.
yeah, I highly recommend it. If you have the time, do it.
There we go. So hey, we ended on a good note, positive note. Advice for the week. Oh, I remember one more thing. This week, of course, for those who are golf enthusiasts, you know that the Arnold Palmer Invitational is happening. And right now, Rocco Mediate, who is from Greensburg, Pennsylvania, is in first place. Go, Rocco! Go, Rocco! But he said something really, really interesting today because, of course, in the golf world, everybody's talking about Tiger Woods having his first named tournament. It'll be the AT&T, and it'll be in July, and baby, and his first baby
Tiger.
And it'll be in July, probably, hopefully, maybe at Congressional. We talked about this briefly last week, and there's a huge discussion among PGA Tour players whether or not this should be a full field event. Like 154 players, or should be like invitational size.
Yeah, we talked about that last
week.
We
talked about that last week, but today Rocco said something. Rich Lerner was interviewing him, and Rocco said, the rank and file need to shut up. Now, I thought that was funny. Now, Rocco said that because he's saying, look how much more money golfers are making because of the presence of Tiger Woods. And he's like, look, if you want to be in the Invitational, you want to be part of this. He said if Tiger dangles the carrot in front of his face, he's going to try to do what is necessary to make sure he's there. He said, if you don't do it and you can't do it and you're not there, oh well. That's the way Rocco's looking at it. And Rocco's my boy. I love him. But in this instance, I'm gonna, and I know Phil Mickelson came down on the side of let's make it invitational size. I think Tiger's talking about pace of play. I think pace of play is a really big issue because it's a lot easier to control a field that's like 105 versus 154. You're going to get done sooner. And it really works out better for the players. But let me say this. I'm not a PGA Tour player, but I've been a marshal for a long, long time. And as a marshal, and, this AT&T, people are going to be coming because kids under 12 are going to be free. Active members of the armed forces are going to get in for free. It's going to be a big family event on July 4th week. So, here's an idea. How about a smaller field, but with maybe additional exemptions and invitations extended to people you wouldn't normally get to see? Because I think in order to grow the game, we got to make sure that some of those grinders, and you know who I mean, the guys who are out there every week, they're on the tour every year. They may hover somewhere around 155th and 175th on tour, but they're working hard. And get some of those grinders in. And get some fun people in there. The John Daly's. Make sure he's there. Make sure Lee Trevino, really fun guys are there. Chi-Chi Rodriguez, if he wants to come, make sure Chi-Chi's there. How can we have a match with, we sometimes don't get to see the guys on the Champions Tour once they go to the Champions Tour. Unless they're still playing, and have the ability to play on the PGA. Get some of the veteran guys out there so the kids and people who are up and coming can see and admire these legends. I mean, golf is one of the few sports where you can walk side by side in the ropes with these players. The likelihood is you're never going to get to throw a pitch in Yankee Stadium. The likelihood is you may never get to the big dance in Madison Square Garden. But you can play Pinehurst and Pebble Beach. And if you know somebody, Oakmont Country Club here, where the U.S. Open is this year. And it's the opportunity to walk with those legends, or the people who aren't legends yet, the ones you don't know. Camilo Villegas, he's been on the tour 2 years, doing very, very well. Maybe an up-and-comer for the future. Charles Howell III. Have an opportunity to experience those guys too, because they're all special. they're all special. So I think if the field was somewhere around 105 and there were 20 exemptions or invitations that were extended to players who might not have automatically gotten in, but just are going to liven it up for everybody on a family week, they should be there. Okay, that's all I have to say on it. And Rocco, that was extremely hysterical. You were lucky I wasn't drinking something at the moment you said that.
And I guess I will finish with a quote of the week.
There we go.
A quote of the week. And this one, I don't exactly remember where I got this. I got this from a chain letter from somebody, actually. And it's pretty nice and simple, but good. It's, don't frown because it's over. Smile because it happened.
There we go. Making a nice
I like that
optimistic
quote.
quote. Yes.
I like that quote. It's so simple, but you should live by it.
Yes. Rather than mourning what is lost, celebrating what one has, and that one had the opportunity to experience it.
Right, and we're done.
We're done. So, send us mail, send us feedback. Thank you so much for the people we've been hearing from. Thank you so much for the beautiful poetry and stuff that you guys have been sending. It's really wonderful. You need to get in touch with us.
Thank you.
They are at
Falcon Dove, FALCONDOVE at arayasimmons.com. AREYASIMMONS. Falcon Dove at arayasimmons.com. Send us your stuff.
Thank you so much for hanging in with us. I am the Falcon.
And I am the Dove.
We hope that you have a wonderful, blessed week. Stay safe. Stay warm if you're in the Northeast getting your snowstorm. Be careful out there if you have to drive.
Peace out.
Peace out.